Hi everyone. My name is Natalia. I'm a member of the Auggie community. Auggie is the #1 platform for parents to find community, share recommendations, and learn from experts. And today we have Ellie, I'm sorry, I combined your first name and last name, Ellie from Forwhen, and we're gonna talk about getting ready for a parents' night out. So Ellie, why don't you go ahead and get started. And if you have any questions throughout Ellie's presentation, just go ahead and pop them in the chat and I'll try and bring them up throughout her presentation.
Thanks so much, Natalia. I'm Ellie. I founded Forwhen. I'm the founder of Forwhen, which is a babysitting service in New York. And I wanted to talk about what to prep for and kind of the current ecosystem of hiring a babysitter. So I am a veteran of consumer startups like Away and Paperless Post, and I started babysitting on a career break of my own. I started, and I did that for a few reasons. One is that I wanted to make some money on my career break, and two was that I wanted to get some hands-on mom training. I knew that I wanted to have a kid soon. As you can see, I did. This is Tate in the photo. She's my 6-month-old. And I thought the babysitting would be really, really good hands-on training. And I quickly realized that finding a sitter in New York was really, really hard for parents. And it's a mix of Facebook groups, WhatsApp groups, random texts, care.com, Sitter City. It's all pretty messy. And I wanted to make that a lot easier. And on the sitter side, it's also really hard for sitters to find work. Parents are through all those different processes, parents actually use very different ways of finding babysitters, and it's hard to figure out the right expectations and kind of standardize that process at all. So I created Forwhen, and we are a babysitting concierge service. So we interview and vet sitters so that parents can send just one text and get matched with a sitter for whenever they need it. So we're currently focused on date night and last minute care for local families and those visiting New York. So, my goal was to really create something that standardized a lot of the unwritten rules of babysitting, because it's actually a really complicated job. Childcare is not easy, as parents know, and especially childcare for someone that isn't your kid. So, my goal is to standardize some of that and make it easier for folks to find a sitter. And now that I have a kid of my own, the mission of making childcare easier to find is even closer to my heart. So before I start on my tips and tricks for how to better find a sitter, I wanted to do a quick poll. I interview every sitter that's a part of our platform myself, and always ask them what the most challenging thing to them about babysitting is. And so I'm curious. I can't see the chat, but Natalia can. You can put in the chat what you think um, your is the thing that all sitters find the most challenging: bonding with kids, communicating with parents, navigating parents working from home, or screen time battles. I'm curious what people put in.
I put in my guess for B. We have another guess for B.
Okay.
Anyone else? C. Navigating parents working from home. Another C. So we're tied. 2B, 2C.
Okay, I'll reveal what the #1 thing that parents say is, or #1 thing that sitters say is, and that is communicating with parents, for sure. Which isn't surprising to me. Every family is really, really different. Even if actually the taking care of kids part of babysitting can be pretty similar, based on depending on the age, the things that you want as parents and your house rules can be really different from your neighbors, your friends, etc. So, everyone, sitters and parents alike, have the best intentions for creating a safe and loving environment for, the kids while the parents are out. But that doesn't mean everyone's going to go about it the same way. It's also really personal. It's a really personal relationship. As a parent, you're welcoming someone new into your home, and they're taking care of what's most precious to you. And from my own experience as a sitter, parents can really range in their onboarding of sitters. Some people are really prepared and have lists of bedtime routines and notes. And some people are like, I gotta go, I'm running out the door right now. And so depending on, all the prep info you've got ahead of time, you're going to make your best as a sitter, you're going to make your best gut decisions on what works best for the kids. And that, may change depending family to family. So it's always good to kind of outline a lot of those unspoken rules. I would say oftentimes navigating parents working from home is like a second most issue I hear a lot. I think, in the world of post-COVID, it is harder when a parent like pops in and out of the room all the time. But unfortunately, I don't really have any tips for that besides, respecting the sitter's workspace and all that. But that is a tough situation too. So also before we get into tips for finding and interviewing sitters, I wanted to just quickly look at the overall ecosystem of finding a sitter currently. So, on the scale of trustworthy to unreliable and hard to track and easy to use, fellow parent referrals are the number one thing that people want and trust. But as we know, it's often hard to find, a sitter that someone you really close to you has used. And it's also really hard to track those referrals. Sometimes you just get sent like a number and a name being like, this is Ellie, this is her number, she's a great sitter. And you're like, that's not enough info. Like, where do they live? How much will it cost for me to send an Uber home for them? What's their background? All that stuff. So that those can be trusted, but often kind of messy. Then there's Facebook groups, which are, in the middle, a bit harder to track and unreliable because you just, Facebook groups, even those that say they're, vetted and private, can often just let folks in. So it really depends. And then the care.com, Urban Sitter, Bambino, whatever service is most popular in your city or area, are often easy to use and have all that information about the sitter's background. But it's always kind of a crapshoot on if they're reliable. I personally used care.com when I was a sitter and had great experiences and met great families. But then you also hear folks that have some stories of people that like really weren't fits for their family that they found on these websites. So Forwhen is trying to circle that square, or whatever the right phrase is, of being both trackable and trustworthy by just having the one place to text, one person to talk to, and share all your information. So, but I'm curious if there are any other services or things that I missed in this ecosystem for finding a sitter that people use, that whether they're good or bad. But I'm curious if there's any others that I'm missing here. Feel free to chime in throughout.
Nothing in the chat right now. I personally haven't had to deal with that yet. So
okay, so going through I want to break it down from the whole process of sourcing a sitter to interviewing a sitter, prepping for a sitter, and then enjoying your time out. The goal, this often, if any of you hire in your full-time jobs, this often looks like, a candidate pipeline, and it is kind of a candidate pipeline for you could argue the most important job of all, the job of someone who's taking care of your kids. And the goal of this is to enjoy actually your time out. So all of this work, while it may seem like a good amount of work to hire a babysitter, the goal is for you to be as prepared and as like feeling confident to leave the house as possible, whether it's a date night, a friend hang, a work event, whatever. The goal is so that you're not constantly refreshing your phone and actually more stress than if you hadn't hired a sitter at all. So the goal of all of this upfront work is to, let you live in the moment a little bit more when you actually are out of the house and away from your kids. Okay, so first for sourcing a sitter, also just I'm probably going to use the pronouns like she, her when I talk about sitters. I know there are male sitters. I know a bunch of amazing ones, but most of them are use she, her pronouns or female. So I will stick with that, but just a generalization. So the first one to think about is changing your definition of a referral. Like I said, like everyone wants to find a sitter that a friend or fellow parent previously used and loves. Like that would be so easy if you could just pass around a number and um, that sitter would be free and ready and qualified to take care of your kids. However, it's not always that easy. First, like I said, every family is really different. So just because, your neighbor or another close mom friend use that sitter, that doesn't mean that they're going to be a perfect fit for your family. So second, even if you do love that sitter and think they're amazing and want them to sit with your kids, they could be booked. If anyone's tried to book a sitter over the summer, especially, it's really, really hard with, everyone's out of town. People's schedules change really quickly. And so it's important to have kind of a backup of sitters to consider. So my goal is to have you open up what that definition of referral is. That means ask a WhatsApp group full of moms that live in your area, but you don't know well. Put it on Facebook. Look on care.com and you can see that someone's, booked by 5 parents in your area, etc. Just because if it could be another mom, but or another parent, but just because you don't know them personally, it doesn't mean you shouldn't consider them a like good referral source for finding a sitter. I would also say on this one that people really want to work. Sitters, like there are way more sitters than jobs. I know in New York specifically, I don't know in every city, but there are a lot of people out there who love taking care of kids, need the extra money, and are qualified to do so. So it's if you kind of open your aperture a little bit of the pool that you're looking at, you will find really great sitters. I think it actually is kind of the demand for childcare is always rising, but I think the current economic situation where a lot of people out of work, a lot of people in like fractional jobs actually means that there are a lot of people who are open to different arrangements, and that includes babysitting. So second is knowing what you're looking for. So what I mean is think about your ideal babysitter profile. Is it a college student who's home for the summer? Is it someone with just a few years of experience, but they have really high energy and are willing to learn? Is it someone who actually has an early education background, so is really qualified and experienced, and is, offer advice on things like sleep training or, hitting milestones or something like that, depending on the age of your kid, your approach to a sitter, all that kind of stuff. Is it someone who does like cleaning? Like, is that a skill you're also looking for and want a sitter to pull double duty? These are just some examples, but these sitters will have different rates. These sitters will be able to help you with different goals, but all of them would take great care of your kids. So it's really about what you're looking for in a sitter and kind of what role you want them to play in your household. Is it someone who you just like want to tire your kids out, and so you're looking for someone really young who can or really active to run them around a playground? Or is it someone that you have a infant and you really want help with naps, help with sleep training, that kind of thing? So just think about the kind of sitter that you want, and also your budget, because someone who has a lot more experience, has an early education background, for example, is going to charge more than a student home for the summer. So think about your budget, think about the goals, and go from there. Also, if anyone has any questions anytime, feel free to pop them in the chat and I can go through them. you around.
No questions so far, but Megan
Okay.
did agree that finding a sitter in the summer is very difficult.
Really difficult. Yeah. There's some people in some of the mom chats that I'm in that are like, I messaged 12 people about Labor Day and found no one. But that's not the case for me personally. I have a lot of sitters available if anyone's in New York and is still looking. But yeah, it's summer. It definitely is more difficult for sure. Um, okay, moving on to interviewing a sitter. So once you found someone that you think could be a fit for your family, whether that was on Facebook or Care or anywhere else, um, my personal preference is to have a video call to chat with your sitter for the first time. To me, it's a lot easier just to get the vibe of someone over video versus a phone call. And I think going straight to in person is like a lot of time commitment that you're asking from the sitter. So to me, a video call is a good happy medium of getting to know them while not requiring a ton of work on really either of your ends. I do video interviews with every sitter that I work with, and to me, it's like the biggest indicator of how they're going to show up at like on the job, because I think a lot of sitters are really good at working with kids, but not every sitter is very good at talking to parents. And that video interview that I have with them is kind of that like talking to parents test. It's, how are you a good communicator? Are you going to show up on time? Are you going to, um, be professional, ask me good questions, and that um, kind of vibe check is really important to me about how to show how they'll show up. So like I said, treat it like work. Like this is a job. I've seen a lot of parents that are really casual about interviewing and setting expectations for their sitter. And it is personal, but it's not casual, if that like differentiation makes sense. You know, I I'll share a set of interview questions with you guys after this as a resource for the future, but I have that set of questions and stick to them so that I can compare between sitters and see their responses. Obviously, you should be conversational and get to know them and be as personal as makes sense. But having that ability to compare people's answers is super helpful if you're comparing a few different candidates. The second thing that has worked really well for me is using situational examples. So a question that I always ask sitters is, can you give me an example of a time that a kid in your care was really upset and what you did to calm them down? And so this question does a few things. One, it lets them, speak to a real life example and not just some like, what would you do if X happened? And another thing is that I really like hearing how they speak about kids in their care, because you can tell like how fond of them they were based on their tone. You can see if their face lights up being like, oh, this 2-year-old I used to sit for, they were so funny, but they always broke down when it was nap time or blah, blah, blah. And so just hearing their like genuine care for the kids that they sat for, to me is really instructional and connotes how they would be with your kids and your family. Because yeah, like to me, like I feel so fondly about kids even I used to sit for like 2 years ago, and so it's good to kind of hear how they would speak about it. And third is reference checks. So I always recommend doing at least 1 to 2 reference checks for every sitter that you work with. And reference checks are biased. Someone's not going to give you the number of someone that like they didn't enjoy working with and know that they wouldn't say bad things about them. However, you can still get a sense of, if this is just a kind of rote, like you're the last family I worked with, and so I'm going to give a pretty generic reference of that person, or if the parent like can't say enough good things about that sitter. So while they are biased, I think it is another just vibe check on the way to finding someone that works for you. one question I always like to ask in a reference check to the parent is, how, especially for older kids, is how would the kids describe the babysitter, and, why do they have fun with them? And so, hearing them kind of speak, imagine it from the kids' perspective, to me is really instructional. And sometimes even if a mom might be like, oh, like yell to her kids in the background, be like, hey, like, what do you like most about, like Kelly or whatever. And so it's like nice to hear an actual kid like chime in on that. Um, Another question I really like asking references, again, that I'll share afterward, is like, tell me about a moment that the sitter really impressed you. So maybe that's a time when like an after school pickup got mangled and like someone was 20 minutes late, or and they like jumped in to help, or the mom got called into work and the babysitter was available last minute, or whatever. But kind of trying to get them to speak to a moment that um, represents their character and their genuine care for the kids is helpful. Uh, okay,
Ellie,
last but
sorry,
not,
may
yeah,
I?
go ahead.
I actually have a question about the
Yeah.
interview part. Have you ever had an instance where somebody seemed really great in the interview and then they turned out to not be so great and they kind of like fooled you, or have you seen anyone else have that experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I have I have thankfully only had to like quote unquote like fire from my service like I think just one sitter, and that was just a case. She was really great, really sweet, but was consistently late to the sits, and did that with like on like three different occasions, and not just like 10 minutes late, like the subway's running behind, you know normal, you can excuse lateness, but like an hour late, and like um and so after like repeated instances of that, I told them that I like couldn't offer them to book, I couldn't like recommend them for jobs anymore because they just weren't reliable. um so that's the only case where it's been like a mismatch from their personality to their reliability. um but and fingers crossed there are not a ton more of those in my future. But um yeah, that's the other um another reason like why I do the video interview and I have them schedule ahead of time, is just like so I can see that they show up when they say they will. And to me, that's just, even if it's something as small as a video call, like that is like demonstrating that is like an important skill, because that's like what parents are looking for too.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad that that's been the only case.
Yes, me too. Fingers crossed. Um, okay, so imagine you have found the sitter, someone you found on Facebook or Care or whatever, that you interviewed and had a really good experience with. Um, uh, I guess one other thing I wanted to touch on is whether to do an in-person meet and greet. A lot of people ask me that, and that's really up to you. The if it's someone that you are going to be working with on an extended basis, I feel like that might make sense. If you're doing it like 3 times a week, several hour per day sitting gig or a nanny gig, that makes sense. For a date night sitter, uh, again, whatever the parent is comfortable with is fine, but just it's worth considering like the amount of work you're asking for a sitter to do for just like a meet and greet that is unpaid. If they're commuting a half an hour each way and spending, or whatever time with you, that is like a lot of their day that is spent on that work. So just something worth thinking about. But ultimately, it's up to you whether you want to meet someone in person ahead of time. Okay, phase 3 is prepping for your sitter. Once you booked a sitter, found a time that works, all that stuff, and feel really good about them showing up, the first thing is just document everything. The more you write down, the better. If your sitter is doing bedtime or any other multi-step routine, you can really set them up for success by writing it out, sharing it with your sitter, and walking through it when they arrive. It's really easy to like do something like save that in a note on your phone so that you can update it for future sitters and kind of tweak it as your kids' needs change. I also have a template for that I can share at the end of this call, that I use it for when to, common questions like, um, you know, emergency contacts, medical info, things your little one loves, things to avoid, all that kind of stuff. And another sticking point I really see between parents is when they want to be contacted during the sit. So it's important just to think about the situations that would like mean that you wanted to be texted or called. Do you want photos throughout the sit? Do you not want to be contacted unless something is really urgent? That just helps you create that communication with your sitter so that they know when to message you or not. I recently had a situation where I asked all my parents to sit sitters like out of 5 and like rate them out of 5, and someone said a sitter was like a 4.5. So I asked them what they could have done to make it better, and they said that their kids, after they went to bed, were really yelling for their parents, and really missed them, and kind of throwing a bit of a fit, and that they would have wanted to know that in the moment. And to me, that's just a pretty classic case of kind of like a parent sitter communication mismatch, is that as sitters, as someone who used to sit a lot, kids miss their parents all the time. Like it's kind of like I feel like sometimes you spend half of sit being like, your mommy will be home soon, we'll do something fun until they come back, blah, blah, blah. And so it's hard to know as a sitter what constitutes like an emergency of, like they really want to hear from you that they're really upset, or if it's just normal kind of the kids miss their mom or dad behavior. So I would determine like the approach that would, give you the most comfort, and then share that with the sitter so that they're really clear on when to contact you or not. Second is just outlining expectations ahead of time for transportation and food. So Forwhen is based in New York, and so most people use public transit to get to the sit. But if it's a late night sit, like after 10, I usually recommend that parents offer to pay for an Uber home. And if that isn't in your budget, that's okay. But I would just make that clear to the sitter whether you are including the offer of an Uber home, because if they don't have reliable transportation and they have to take a car home, that could be like an hour or two's worth of pay, like out of what they just made, and they may no longer find that sit worth it if they have to pay for their own way home, and don't feel comfortable taking transit. So just good to have that conversation ahead of time when booking. And same thing about dinner, for example. A lot of families ask if they should provide dinner for their sitter if it's a night sit. And, if your budget allows, it's obviously very nice to offer to cover like DoorDash or whatever to your sitter. But if that isn't in your budget or doesn't make sense for you, that's okay too. Just tell the sitter so that they can, eat beforehand, that they can bring their own food, or, people are picky. So it's totally fine to offer something like cheese pizza if that's what you're ordering for your kids, or say like, hey, these are the leftovers we have, you can feel free to have them. But don't assume that your sitter can eat that, because we all know everyone has different dietary needs. So just important to outline those ahead of time, because there's definitely been situations where parent, I haven't talked about that beforehand with the parent when I was a sitter, they leave for the night and it's like 7:30 and I'm like, oh crap, I haven't eaten. Like, and then you end up ordering DoorDash or something, and you're like, do I tell you later that I'd like you to pay for this? It just becomes a pretty uncomfortable situation that you ideally would outline ahead of time. Okay, and lastly, you want to enjoy your night out. That's what all this was for. I understand that some of this could seem like a lot of work, but you spent the money and time and prepared for a night out or day out or whatever it is. And so all this prep work, the goal is to help you actually really enjoy it and not be stressed the whole time about if your sitter knows where the, goldfish are, or if your kids are going to miss you, or if they're not going to do the bedtime routine correctly. All of this is to, better equip your sitter so that you can actually enjoy your time away. And also, just personally, I hired my first sitter for my 6-month-old last weekend, and I forgot to do a bunch of this stuff. And so when I say that, I mean that even if you did like half of this stuff, I think it would improve your sitter's experience with your family that much better. For example, I forgot to ask about dinner with my sitter. And what else didn't I do? I forgot to talk about communication during the sit. My baby was already asleep for most of the sit. And so, and is normally a pretty good sleeper. So I was just kind of like fingers crossed that nothing would happen. And she ended up waking up, and my sitter Alex like had to rock her and put her back to sleep, which ended up being totally fine. And thankfully I wasn't checking my phone for that 15-minute period where that all happened. And so she texted me like, "Oh, Tate woke up, blah, blah, blah. It's all fine now. She's back asleep." And I was like very happy to have not been like frantically on my phone during that, or else it would have probably made me even more stressed. So even just doing some of these things will make, that communication with your sitter that much better. Because just like you're looking for your favorite sitter, sitters are looking for their favorite family to work with, and their favorite family to work with is one that's clear with them, has clear expectations. They know what to do. They're not confused or feeling like, "Oh crap, I forgot to ask them this." So it can be much more mutually beneficial to prep with some of this work. So yeah, that's what I have. I would love to hear any questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, Ellie, I just wanted to, hi, this is James. I'm a Brooklyn dad, and just want to
Hi.
firstly say thanks for the presentation today. Really helpful. I was glad to see that some of the suggestions were ones that we were already implementing, and so I just wanted to start by saying that I can vouch for the idea of, the more you prep your sitter, the happier the sitter and the better the sitting experience. Because if they feel taken care of, they'll probably likely take care of your kids too. So yeah, one thing that our sitter remarked on early on that she really enjoyed was the fact that we put together a care doc ahead of time, and that we were actually thinking about, okay, what is she going to eat, either for lunch and or dinner, and what time is she going home, and can we, cover her cab? So those are all considerations that I think she really, really appreciated, and helped her kind of integrate into our family a lot more quickly. But I wanted to ask you, do you typically rebook um, the same sitter so that they can kind of get used to the routine? And then how feasible do you find that? And at what point does that mean they're, transitioning to being a nanny and not a sitter? So I was just wanted to start there.
Yeah, that's a good question. If you had a good experience with a sitter, and I would always try like message them first when you come back and say like, "Oh, like, can you sit for James again and his family again?" But it's really all based on availability, and that was kind of one of the reasons that why I started Forwhen, is that when I was a sitter and a family that I loved working with would text me and be like, "Oh, can you babysit on Friday night?" If I wasn't free on Friday, I would have like nothing to tell them because I didn't know any other babysitters. And so it just it felt very negative to me to just say like, "Nope, like I can't help you." And
Hmm.
so, my goal with Forwhen is to kind of standardize that a little bit and let you know that even if you can't work with, Kelly or whoever, for example, that um, the next person would also have the same like sitter prep info about your family. They would have gone through the same interview process and
Mm.
gone through those same checks, so that even though they'll have a different personality and just be different, that you can hopefully have some peace of mind that they are just as equipped to prepare for to take care of your kids.
Yeah. That's helpful. Thank you very much. And then
Mhm.
just one quick follow-up question. So, and you may have touched on it earlier in the talk, but I perhaps I missed it, but what were like a couple or two or three characteristics that you think make a really strong sitter? I think you kind of touched on it before, but yeah, what are the things that you typically expect from them to feel like really like satisfied about the experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say uh, probably number one is just creativity. And I mean that both from a like
Mm,
coming up with fun activities to do with your
yeah.
kids,
Mm,
but also from a I'm gonna figure this out kind of perspective. One question that I ask every sitter is also like if you come up into a situation that you didn't cover with the parents, like, the kid wants more dessert or, whatever it is, how do you handle that situation? And, you know, a
yeah.
lot of people say, oh, I just text the parent. But to me, that's like a lazy answer. To me,
Hmm.
the answer is like, I distract them. I come up with like 7 other things to like to do instead of that thing that I know they can do, and like, just come up with any other solution besides defaulting to texting the parents, because like I said, you guys, like, parents paid for this experience, um and they want to enjoy their time out and not get texted a million questions from the babysitter all night long. So just being creative with both the activities and the problem solving, to me, is super, super important.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks again, Ellie, and I love what you're doing with Forwhen.
Thanks.
I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, but do you mind telling us? I mean, I'm mostly just curious about how Forwhen works. Is it like a service that you have to pay for in addition to the babysitter, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it was really important to me to first not charge the sitters for being part of the platform, because care.com and all those other sitting services charge you as a sitter like an annual fee. And it's usually like less than $100 or something, but that's a lot of money. And or they take a cut. A lot of sitting services, they might charge a parent like $35 an hour or something, and then they pay you 25. So to me, that's not fair to take away from the sitter's work. So I just do a per booking fee to the parent. So there's no membership. It's just a ad hoc small fee for actually booking, and it's like a larger fee for your first booking, and then smaller for every subsequent time, just because it's more like maintenance mode versus the onboarding. But I'm a very small business, so I can't really say whether this economic approach is sustainable in the long term. But not charging sitters is definitely part of like my DNA, because like this is their hard-earned money, and I don't think that like we should take away from that as a like service.
Yeah, totally agree. Are you going to expand to Miami? I'm kidding.
Yeah, hopefully I would love to expand, hopefully Philly first, given that's where I live now, but would love to expand further from there.
Awesome. Does anyone have any other questions?
So Natalia can put in the chat the resources that I talked about. So questions for the sitter, questions for a reference, and the sitter prep guide that I use. And so you can feel free to copy those and tweak them based on your needs. But if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. And also, if you enjoyed any of this, I would love, and don't live in New York. Obviously, if you do live in New York, I would love for you to try us. But if you don't live in New York and have any parent friends there, sending them our website would be a big win for us to grow.
Okay. Awesome. Well, if nobody else has any other questions, I just dropped those resources in the chat. Thank you so much, Ellie, and everyone else for joining. And I hope everyone has a great day.